Chapter 1. A Beautiful Wife. I cannot recall how, when, or where I met Ligia. It was a long time ago, and my memory is not good. However, I believe I first encountered her in a large, old city near the Rhine in Germany. She informed me that she came from an ancient family, but I never learned the family name of the woman who became my friend, my partner in my studies, and ultimately my wife. Why did I never discover her family name? Perhaps because she did not want me to find out. But I cannot remember. One thing I remember clearly is that she was tall and slim. As time went on, she became very thin. How can I describe her quiet, aristocratic movements or the peculiar softness of her footsteps? If she entered my office, I only knew she was there when I heard her voice or when she placed her white hand on my shoulder. She possessed a beautiful face, although it did not possess a classical kind of beauty. There was something peculiar about it. I have often tried to comprehend it. Was it her pure white skin or her thick black hair? I often gazed at her long, delicate nose. It was perfect. I observed her sweet mouth, how soft and red it was, and when she smiled, her teeth were white. Then I gazed into her eyes. They were larger than normal eyes. Occasionally, when she was excited, they resembled the eyes of a deer. They were black, with long black eyelashes and eyebrows. However, as I looked into them, I realized they had a peculiar expression. I pondered it for many hours, sometimes all night. What was the expression in those eyes? I yearned to know. Many times, I believed I was on the verge of discovering the answer, but then it slipped away. Ligia was remarkably determined. She was always calm and composed, but her determination was evident in her eyes. It radiated like a terrible energy, and at times, it frightened me. Ligia was also highly intelligent. She excelled in Latin and Greek, and she possessed a flawless command of many other languages. She never made a mistake. She was also a student of science and mathematics. When we first married, I frequently sought her assistance with my studies, and we worked together. However, after she passed away, I was alone. Without her, I felt like a child lost in the dark. When she initially fell ill, she did not come to my aid as often as before. She grew thin, and her skin became pale and translucent. When I realized she was dying, I felt desperate. Ligia fought against death with all her might. She was determined to live. I watched in agony as she battled for her life. I knew she loved me, but it was only in her final moments that I truly comprehended the depth of her love. She held my hands and professed her devotion to me. I cannot speak of it now, but let me say that her love for me was intertwined with her determination to survive. On the night she passed away, she suddenly rose from her bed and cried, "Oh God, must I die? Must I lose my fight against death? No, I cannot die like this." But my dear Lygia died. I was consumed by sorrow, and I could not remain in the old city by the Rhine. For a few months, I traveled around, and then I purchased an old abbey in a secluded part of England. This dark, melancholic place reflected my feelings of isolation. However, I adorned it with beautifully colored curtains, carpets, and ornaments. I told myself, perhaps the vibrant colors will bring me happiness. Unfortunately, they did not. I began to drink excessively, but I do not wish to dwell on that period of my life. I will only mention that one day I married Lady Rowena Trevanion of Tremaine. My new wife had blonde hair and blue eyes. She was vastly different from my first wife. However, how could I ever forget Lygia? Chapter 2. A Fight with Death. I took Lady Rowena back to a room high up in the tower of the abbey where we lived for the first month of our marriage. The room was very large, with an enormous window made of glass from Venice. The ceiling was high like a church, and in the center there was a big gold chandelier. There were sofas from the East and an Indian bed. On the walls were long tapestries like carpets with designs made of gold. The tapestries moved every time the wind blew. My wife was afraid of me because I was often sad and depressed. She did not love me much and stayed away from me, but I preferred this. I always thought about Lygia, my beautiful idea dead in the tomb. Sometimes in my dreams, I call to her in the night. I imagined that perhaps my love for her could bring her back to me. At the beginning of the second month, Lady Rowena became ill. She did not sleep very well and told me she could hear sounds and movements in the tower. "You have a fever," I said. "You're imagining things." She got better, but then she went back to bed with a second illness worse than the first. The doctors could not understand it. Again, Rowena began to hear little sounds and movements in the bedroom, and they frightened her. One night at the end of September, she woke up suddenly. I was sitting on a sofa by her bed. She whispered to me that she could hear sounds and see movements, and there was a frightened expression on her thin face. but I saw and heard nothing. "It's the wind," I explained. "You can see the tapestries moving in the wind." But her face was white with fear, and she nearly fainted. I remembered that there was some wine on the table on the other side of the room. As I walked under the light of the chandelier, a strange thing happened. I felt something invisible pass me, and on the carpet I saw a shadow, almost the shadow of a shadow. I decided to say nothing to Rowena. I poured out a glass of wine and gave it to her. Then I sat on the sofa and watched her. After some moments, I heard very quiet footsteps on the carpet coming towards the bed. A second later, as Rowena was about to drink the wine, I saw, or perhaps I dreamed that I saw, 3 or 4 large drops of a bright red liquid fall into the glass. Rowena did not see it. She drank the wine, and I said nothing because I thought it was only my imagination. After this, Rowena's health got much worse, and on the 3rd night, she died. Her servants prepared her for the tomb, then covered her with a sheet. The next night, I sat alone with her body in the bedroom. Strange forms and shadows moved around me. I looked nervously into the dark corners, at the moving tapestries, and I felt frightened. Then I looked at the carpet under the chandelier. There was no shadow there, and I felt better. When I looked at Rowena on the bed, sad memories of Ligeia, the only woman I ever loved, came back to me. It was perhaps around midnight when I heard a sound. It was quiet but clear, and it woke me from my dreams. I thought it came from the bed. I listened in terror, but I did not hear it again. I looked carefully at Rowena for any sign of life. She was not moving, but I continued to look at her. Minutes passed, then I noticed a little color in Rowena's face. My heart stopped in horror. I could not move. When I realized that Rowena was not dead, I attempted to revive her. However, soon the color vanished from her cheeks and her face returned to a marble-like appearance. Her lips became thin, bearing the horrifying expression of death. As her body grew cold and rigid, I collapsed onto the sofa and dreamt of Ligeia. An hour later, I heard the same sound as before. I listened intently and confirmed its recurrence, a sigh from the bed. I rushed over and observed her trembling lips, which then parted to reveal her bright teeth.